Hello, I'm David Curl. I'm a counsellor at Therapy Spaces Putney, close to East Putney Tube, and also online. And I work with teenagers, parents of teenagers, and adults generally. There's more information at davidcurlcounselling.com. This is the second of 5 July videos, and in this one, I'm telling a couple of jokes and drawing out just one or two key points from each. To illustrate with the first one, a couple of key points about what it's like to seek counselling, and then with the second, something about what we might reasonably expect from counselling if we do make that shorter or longer term commitment to ourselves. Beginning next week, we'll start talking about stages of adolescence. Okay, so here's the first joke. And please do bear in mind that as a 50 something male, I'm just going to go right ahead and live down to that stereotype of dad jokes as being a bit corny and nothing much to write home about. So, a moth arrives at an accountant's office, and the accountant says, "Hello, Moth, what's the problem?" And the moth says, "What's the problem? Where do I even begin? Shall I tell you about work? It feels like the universe is cruelly mocking me each weekday morning as I begin the grueling preparations for another 9 hours of meaningless toil as a grey self captive in a grey cubicle in a grey office without even any windows that would allow me to see the grey clouds beyond. I honestly don't know what I'm doing. I don't think my boss knows. I have zero connection with my co workers. Or shall I tell you about my home life? My oldest son is always on his mobile phone, texting and messaging his friends. And I don't like or trust his friends. I've not spoken real words to him in weeks. My daughter is never home, and when she is, she's locked in her room listening to angry music. And my youngest son, my precious boy, he's only 4. I look at him and he asks me to play, and I feel nothing. No love, no tenderness, just a void. And you know what? I look in the mirror sometimes and I don't recognise the face staring back at me. Dark, hollow eyes where once gleamed hope and excitement, thin lips unable to find the smile of the happy, old, vanished days. How can I change things and begin to feel again some spark of the joy that I used to feel? And the accountant says, "Well, Moth, you're certainly experiencing some bad times at the moment. You need to get some help, but I'm an accountant. I mainly help people with their tax returns and self employment problems. It seems like you need to see a counsellor most likely. Why did you come to see me?" And the moth thinks about this and then replies, "Well, yeah, I guess it was because the light was on." Moths have moth instincts, don't they? And their most famous instinct, their innate ability to navigate by the light of the moon, a wonder of evolution, isn't always helpful to them in this world where there's so much artificial indoor lighting. It leads to situations where what could have been purposeful navigation instead becomes trapped, repetitive circling. As humans, we have instincts too, of course, but more to the point, we have life scripts, beliefs about ourselves, about the world, about how and when and whether and from whom we should seek help. And sometimes those come into play when we're troubled and needing to seek help, and we knock on several wrong doors before we find the right one. And wrong doors can include things like friendships or relationships that in hindsight were clearly wrong for us, pastimes or behavioural loops or even addictions that were never going to fulfil the deeper needs that we were bringing to them, and so on. So, three linked questions that I'll often ask, sometimes in an initial phone call, sometimes in a bit more depth in a first appointment, can include: what leads you to an interest in seeking counselling, and also why now specifically, and also what's been your journey over days, weeks, perhaps even years to phoning or emailing someone like me. I'd be asking those questions in a spirit of open minded, empathic curiosity, by the way, Because just like not every problem is an accountancy shaped problem, likewise, not every human problem is a counselling shaped problem. And it wouldn't be ethical, because as a BACP member, I do aim to align my practice with the BACP ethical framework, if I was giving you the hard sell at any point. But if you do arrive at an understanding that it's worthwhile for you to book a first or some subsequent counselling sessions with me, then of course we can take that forward. And if we arrive at a shared understanding that this is a counselling shaped problem, but not within my specific skill set, then I can talk with you in a non pushy way about whether I can share not your name or any details that would identify you at that point, but just a brief outline of your presenting concerns to see if I can match you with someone in my professional network of other counsellors and therapists. I can then tell you about them, or you can look up their details online to see if you feel see if you feel that that would be a good fit. Okay, so here's the second joke, and this one's a bit shorter, you'll be glad to know. While making her rounds at the hospital, a senior doctor points out an X-ray to a group of medical students. As you can see, the doctor says, this patient is limping because his left fibula and tibia are radically arched. And the doctor then turns to one of the students and she asks, okay, what would you do in a case like this? And the student pauses, thinks, reflects, and then answers, yeah, you know what? I'd probably be limping as well. So I take my hat off to medical students, actually, and to doctors, nurses, physiotherapists, anyone who works in the area of physical therapy and physical healing. Because while I was studying English literature at university, maybe feeling at some moments like having the right take on George Eliot's narrative voice in Middlemarch was some kind of life or death matter, I wore black, mostly black in those days. I was a very serious young man. Peers, also in their very early 20s, were beginning to engage with other people's genuinely difficult life situations. So I digress. What about the medical student in this story? Well, the patient's probably thinking, yeah, you know what? I can't fault your empathy. You're really putting yourself into my situation there, but I can't help feeling that I need a bit more from you than that. And the point of me telling this joke in this context is that counselling, although it definitely does involve empathy, and hopefully in a non fake, non patronising way. I mean, when I was doing my counselling training, there was a joke doing the rounds that one occupational hazard of this profession is getting counsellors tilt, which arises from doing this a bit too much. Yeah, it's that counselling involves a bit more than empathy. I mean, similarly to the hospital patient with the arched tibia and fibula, though differently in some respects too, because counselling formulation has some important differences from medical diagnosis, you'll be wanting an idea from me at some point of what kinds of things might help, if only something along the lines of what might be some good ways of us exploring the situation that you've described to me. I mean, counselling is about listening. To be a counsellor is to be, among other things, a sort of trained listener. But it's also about alternative perspectives, different angles or points of view to try out or to be enabled to find. And it can even be the two of us together coming up with experiments. And yes, we can call them that, because experiments in counselling can take a number of forms. They can involve the classic empty chair technique that you might have heard of from Gestalt therapy, and I'm a Gestalt trained counsellor, where carefully and gently we work up to me saying, okay, imagine that some problematic figure in your life, your dad, maybe your mum, your ex-partner, is sitting in that empty chair over there across from the two of us. What do you most need to be saying to them? And then you experience yourself saying what you feel like you've needed on some level to have been saying for years. And then within the safety and confidentiality of counselling, we unpack that together. More straightforwardly, it can involve you saying to yourself, right, I'm going to behave over this next week at work, at home, towards a significant other person in my life in this noticeably different way that I have a hunch could seriously contribute to my well-being. And then I'm going to report back at my next counselling session on how it went. And again, we can gently explore and unpack that together in ways that enable you to make further course corrections as needed. So that's pretty much all that I've been wanting to share today. And I hope that thinking about those two jokes together has been helpful in shedding some light on, first, what the journey to counselling can potentially involve, and second, how counselling, when a person gets there, can be meaningfully goal directed and future focused, over and above how it's obviously based on empathy and on being listened to. And goals can evolve over time, of course. So thank you for spending the past 10 minutes with me, and do by all means join me again next week when we'll begin talking about stages of adolescence.